Welcome back to our series on implementation. In today's episode, Merle Benny, founder of Nonprofit Champion, joins us to discuss the importance of stakeholder engagement. What is a stakeholder? How can stakeholders elevate the mission of nonprofits and support leaders during this important phase of the implementation work?
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee Time with Masterminds. My name is Peter Blakely, and I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am Cynthia Rojas, founder and principal of To Your Growth.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I'm Rebecca Tuttle, founder and principal of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good. Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds, a 30-minute conversation with leaders of mission-based organizations. We want to welcome everyone across the United States, the world, Australia, where we're syndicated. While you're here, please introduce yourself in the comments, say hello, and be sure to interact and ask questions or make comments as we go throughout today's episode. I'm Rebecca Tuttle, and you're watching Coffee Time with Masterminds. I'm joined today by my two amazing co-hosts and colleagues, Peter Blakely and Cynthia Rojas. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Rebecca. Hi, Peter.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm pretty excited to welcome Merle to the show. It's been a long time coming, and we're going to have a great show today.
We are. I can't wait to tell the world who Merle is.
I know. Well, she's joining us today as the founder of the Nonprofit Champion, and she actually offers nonprofit practical advice and a guide for stakeholder engagement as well as communication. She's a connector, a convener of nonprofits. She helps them build strong voices, build relationships, and also establish partnerships, which are really important, especially in today's episode topic. Merle's here today to discuss stakeholder engagement and how it relates to nonprofit implementation. Welcome, Merle. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Hi, Merle. So nice to see you.
Hello.
Before we get started, I think it'd be fun if we all talked a little bit about how the four of us met. Do you want to share a little the story of how we met, Cynthia?
So how we all met is at what I was calling consultants camp back in I think it was 2019. Rebecca and Cynthia and I all separately got invited to a training that the Hartford Foundation was putting on for people who consult to not-for-profits, and Merle was one of the leaders of that program.
Yeah, and then
out of that, it's amazing.
I was doing math, and it was 3 years ago. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
3 years.
So Peter offered the cliff notes of that experience. But it was really mind-blowing. There were, I think, 20 consultants, all at various levels, right? So I was brand spanking new, 9 months into my developing a business. Rebecca had been in it for 7 years. Peter had been in it for 4. So it was really a coming together. And I think calling it what did you call it? Consultants boot camp?
Yeah.
Really a great description. But we spent an entire week. That part I don't remember.
I think it was only 2 days, but we've definitely crammed in a week's worth of stuff.
Yes, with Merle and two other facilitators. So this is where, Merle, it all started in the same room that you were in 3 years ago.
And here we are, our 104th episode. Unbelievable.
Yeah. All because Rebecca said, I really want to do LinkedIn Live.
Yes.
We didn't know how to do it, and it took us a while to figure it out. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. So it would be great today. To start the show today, Merle. Just how do you define stakeholder engagement? Because you do a lot of work in this area, and before you give us even more of your expertise, I think just to start out with stakeholder engagement would be great.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So I do love our meeting story, and I think it's a perfect example of stakeholder engagement because we were sort of all stuck in a room together for 2 days and could have stayed in our own silos and learned what we came there to learn and gone home. But the three of you particularly, saw something else and did something else. And I think that's really what stakeholder engagement is about. It's just about knowing, just, who's in the room and whether it was a physical room or not, and what can we do? How can we connect? And to me, it all starts with the right message. So knowing what you want to say and what you want to share comes first. But then after that, connection is just important, and working it, really just working on being engaged and being an engager. So I always say that to be a connector, makes you connected. And
it's such
I see it working.
It's so easy to forget, right? I mean, we have been talking the last couple of weeks about how you can mess up an implementation, where things can go wrong. And I think forgetting that it extends beyond the doors of your organization is a huge pitfall. So, Merle, how do you know who to include in these conversations? Before we even get to effectively engaging them, how do we identify them?
Right. So what is a stakeholder? Yeah. So for nonprofits, I mean, there's a lot. Excuse me. There are a number of different categories of people. Though, if we don't put them in categories, then they're just people, and connecting with people is important. But if we do put them in categories, we have the nonprofit, the employees of the organization, which is a great place to start. We have the board of directors, we have volunteers, we have donors, and then we have the community. In whatever way the community supports us, whether that's interacting with the city or whatever it is where you are. But sort of looking at those buckets and saying, who do I have in each of those, and where am I already connected, and what can I do about that? Like, where can that go? What can we do with it? So I think understanding who the stakeholders are, who matters to you, who's important to you in your organization, and being open to wherever that takes you, but not without being mindful of what it is that you're trying to accomplish, of course.
Yeah.
I wonder, Merle, it is important for us to invite people who are important to us, right? But we're all very stretched. And I wonder if there's value in also mapping how it's valuable to the stakeholder. Otherwise, I would imagine they won't show up to meetings, and this happens all the time. People invite superintendents or politicians, and they're the ones that don't show up. And I just wonder, how can a nonprofit in their engagement strategy ensure that it's valuable to that stakeholder as well?
Well, that goes back to the message, though. So for me, the thing, and I really, this was something I really wanted to know. I really wanted to understand. So I put a lot of effort into really studying it and listening to nonprofit leaders speak and see how they engaged and what their message was. So I think if we stay on the vision level, like, what is it? How do you want the world to look? What is your dream for a better world? Because every nonprofit is formed to do something, to give a gift to the world. And what is that? And sharing that, then you're going to connect with the people who share that vision. And not everybody does, and that's okay. And that you can find out pretty quickly and then move on. But in sharing a dream, in a recent episode, Cynthia, I think you talked about JFK and going to the moon. I mean, that's a perfect example. He didn't say, let's raise money, or let's, identify some important science, or he said, let's go to the moon, and you just go to the moon. That's different than saying, this is how we do it. So staying away from the mission in those early conversations, and maybe all the time with people who you're trying to impress and make a connection with, who are busy and may not give everybody the time that I'm sure they deserve. But So to really stay with the dream, there's a problem and we're going to solve it. And what is that? What is that? What does that dream look like? What does that vision look like? And when somebody connects on that, and so often they do, if you share a dream, if you talk about what matters to you, why your organization exists, and have your own story connected to it, which is easy enough to do, of course, that then people can relate to that. And so often what you hear back is something personal that they share. And once you've done that, you're good. You have a connection. And so being prepared to talk about that dream and what it means to you personally, I think that's really the way we engage people at any level. And I don't know that the people at the highest level are always the ones we want anyway, but there may be somebody, in the mayor's office who does share your dream and has personal experience to make that important to them. So.
I just want to say really quick, we're going to need a pretty solid logic model to broadcast from the moon our next coffee time. But it can be done someday.
Is that a goal, Rebecca? Are we going to broadcast from the moon? Is that
okay, we'll launch our book from the moon.
I love that. Hey, I'm just trying to get to Australia to meet the people who syndicated
that
us.
we can do.
That was a really great. Thank you for sharing that, Merle. That was really great because it reminds me of the importance of capturing your thoughts on paper, of just releasing your ideas, and what a better way or a better time to start journaling that out than when you start that process in your organization. And even though journals are more personalized thing, perhaps there's an exercise that you or another facilitator could facilitate to help something that is similar to that. Because I know from my experience that capturing ideas and posting them around aren't only a nice reminder, but it also shows that teamwork, that everyone's involved in the vision. I really like that.
Yeah, and I think one of the other takeaways here is that stakeholder engagement is going to be a lot of work, and done well, it's worthwhile. But it's really easy to do it poorly, right? It's really easy to invite the wrong people or make an insincere sounding invitation or not communicate what you're doing well, have a kickoff meeting that doesn't really give people the information that they need to stay engaged, right? All these pitfalls. So.
Yeah, I think I'm struck by a couple of things that Merle is saying. And one is I see a lot of collaboratives wanting, again, a politician or wanting a superintendent. And I once worked at a nonprofit, and we tried to engage the school system. We worked in children's mental health. And you would imagine just a natural collaboration, but they have their own crises. And they just couldn't engage. It was really, really challenging. But now in reflection, I'm not sure we did the work, the really granular work of making the connection for them and how it benefits them. And I do think now, in thinking back, that it was a little bit too much about us. And we had our place in the right, we had our heart in the right place. We all serve children, right? And if you do children's mental health, of course, you want to engage schools. But how do you engage schools that are already dealing with their own issues? I mean, just teacher retention is an issue, right? And so that's a big deal. So I think what you're saying is also resonating with me. And this idea of get someone else, right? So I happen to know there is one of our state senators in the state of Connecticut has this on the ground person who does a lot of community work. He is actually probably a better person to connect with than the actual senator, who's very busy and pulled in many directions. So I think that what you're saying is valuable.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. Sometimes, and another thing that's, when you mentioned the school system, we do have to look at it from their point of view, right? So there is, if a lot of things feel like competition. It's why nonprofits don't work well together when they certainly should, but they're feeling like money's tight. and they can't be cooperative. But, in reality, it is helpful to be cooperative and to share. But we do feel often, I think, competitive, and that's a shame. And I think it is part of the nonprofit culture that is difficult to get past, but certainly worth trying and continually trying to just, to reach out to people who do share that dream that you share. When we share the same vision, our mission can be very different, as in the case of what you were talking about with mental health in the school system. But the idea of having well children is shared. So how do we take that common ground and do something with it in a way that's not threatening and that doesn't feel like you're forcing something on that group?
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
So how do you make the connection between stakeholder identification, stakeholder engagement, and now moving toward implementation? I know that's a big question, but oftentimes we engage the same stakeholders that we're familiar with, and they may not be the ones to help us toward implementation. So what advice do you have in that area, Merle?
So engaging with people, but yeah, I'm sorry. What?
Okay, so you talked about stakeholders, identifying stakeholders and what is a stakeholder, and then we moved into stakeholder engagement a little. And now now that we've identified those stakeholders and we're working toward that engagement, how do we now move toward implementation? Because sometimes organizations will engage stakeholders, but they may not be the stakeholders that help them implement.
Right. Right. Yeah. So well, obviously it's all challenging, but I think if we think of it in a really fluid way, so this is why, to me, I use the 3 C's: communicate, connect, and convene. So I think if you see yourself as a communicator, so get to the point where you're able to communicate well about what it is you do, create in your organization a story culture so that there are always stories that you're gathering and sharing. And so with that framework, then you're making connections. So every individual in an organization, not just one, can be making those connections. And it's interesting to map them out. There is a lot of really interesting work that Network Weaving and some other organizations do about kind of mapping out those networks, which is really interesting because then you see where you can make connections or who else in the organization is already connected to somebody that you would like to be connected to. So the story culture, the mapping, it gets you there. And then the connections, you just, continually build those, identify maybe in categories, like we were talking about stakeholder categories. Okay, so who is it that I'd like to meet and what will get me there, and be open to meeting new people, and then convene. So I think the convening, which is an implementation, is it can be really, you can convene on a small issue. You can say that, I've talked to the people in the mayor's office, and I've talked to the school district, and and I think that the thing that we all agree on is that we need, whatever, just something, and spearhead that, bring people together to do that one thing, and that your organization can do well, and that makes sense for those people who will be in a room to solve that one problem, to really feel like we're going to come together and we're going to do this. And if you convene in that way, then you're walking out with a positive outcome, and you have a relationship, which is obviously strengthened by the fact that you did some work together.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have a comment from one of our LinkedIn viewers. So Alexander Abel says, totally agreed. Competing over resources when you have a shared goal is a shame. And he's talking about what we were just mentioning about the competition in nonprofits, and it's very real. And one way that I've learned just through life to reduce the competition is build relationships for the sake of having a relationship. So not only when you need someone, right, or you need a nonprofit, especially nonprofits get a huge federal grant and now they need to bring in partners. And for the first time, they're picking up the phone. Why don't we pick up the phone as soon as we get onboarded to a new role, or there is some talk about a potential program, so that the relationships are being built throughout our time at the nonprofit, and trust gets built, and it reduces competition. So thank you, Alexander. You are right on. It is a shame. It is. But
Yeah.
it's real, Merle. That's what you're saying, that the competition is real.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, look at how long we've been talking about collaboration, and it doesn't happen. So yeah, no, it is real, and it's but if you're hungry and the person next to you is hungry, you don't feel like sharing your meal with them, you feel like eating it. So we do have to be mindful of that, but I think there are small ways that we can do it. And in relationships, then you find ways, right? So if there's a relationship, so you can't just look at an organization as like, oh, they should be working with us. No, it's I met so and so, and together we talked about this, and again, a small implementation, just something together that gets again, towards that shared goal. And it's very easy to say, what is that? What is that thing that we both want to see different in the world?
I think Rebecca brought up another really interesting point about different phases of an implementation, right? There's ideation, planning, actually doing it, right? And then at some point, ideally, this thing becomes just an ongoing program that we do all the time. Well, at what point in this process do we engage our stakeholders?
I say early on, as early as.
Yeah, I guess
there's a balance though, right? I'm sorry, Merle, because if you engage them too early and you don't have a clear direction, it can be a disaster. So I'm really curious to see how you're going to answer this, Merle.
Yeah, but I guess I see connection as just really fluid, and it really is about this. This is who I am. This is the problem that I'm giving my life to solve, and sharing that with people, and just and taking those connections. I mean, I think some of what you're saying is that when you want to be really intentional about who you connect with, then obviously you're going to be more strategic. But I still think that if you're a connector, then those things happen much more naturally. My connector story is I used to have breakfast in New Jersey. You go to the diner for breakfast with my friend Kanani, and we would have breakfast regularly. And every time that I walked away, I had a list of connections that she gave me. And one day I was walking home, and I said, I'm never letting that happen again. I'm going to match her. I'm going to give her as many connections as she gives me. And from that day, I became like really aware of being a connector. And somebody says to me, oh, I'm having trouble with this. I'm like, maybe you could talk to, here, I'm going to give you a couple. And I really work at it. And it's magical because, you give the connections and they come right back at you, and you also become, I use that. After that, I moved to Florida, where I am now. And what do you do when you're a stranger in the city? I'm walking down the street like crying because I don't know anybody. Nobody says hi. And I remembered, what did Connie teach me? And I started just making connections. And it was like so surprising to me that I went to the head of this a business incubator that's a chamber in the city we were talking about before we started the show. And I went to them and said, we need nonprofits to come together. They don't come together. There's no way for them to talk to each other. And they were like, go for it. So it was that easy to make that happen. So that was just because, I was already connected on some level because I was working at it. And so I think and that was going right to the top. And it was easy to do because, just from laying that little groundwork of just being an active connector in the community. And so I think the strategy, we were talking in another episode about strategic planning being like, sometimes it's just the plan and there's no action. It's just a plan.
Yeah.
So being too strategic sometimes is just crippling, I think.
Yeah.
So
Right.
action, the real
Right.
action of just connecting, because then you can walk into a room, any sort of gathering in your community and say,
Mhm.
hey, who do you think I should be talking to about this? I got an issue.
Right.
And you're going to be, and people are going to help you because you've helped them, because they know you're connected,
Mhm.
because they like the fact that you can get them where they need to go. So to me, it feels so much more fluid than
Yeah.
than
And
something,
right.
you know,
And
just
that
a phone
gives,
call or something. Yeah.
that creates the flexibility for people to give when they're able, give less when they're less able, feel like they can connect as they can.
Yeah. So Peter, to go back to your question, I think
Yeah.
it was your question, or maybe Rebecca's. I too think that it starts when you don't need them, right?
Right.
So if you're constantly mapping out potential stakeholders, you start building the relationship now. So you're not
Mhm.
making a cold call when you need someone because you're developing a new program, or the
Yeah.
mayor has asked you to take on this initiative and bring people to the table and you don't know anyone. And
Or
Mhm.
you need
so,
money. That happens a lot. That's a deterrent for funding, is you just call me
yeah,
when you want something, because
yeah,
I'm influential or have resources. Yes. I love
yeah.
where you're going.
So I would invest in that time as early as possible. Yeah,
Yeah.
and build the trust, and get to know the other person. It's just like dating, right? And Merle talked about the story culture, and so I love anything that has the word story in it. And it's what do we do when we're dating? We share stories about our lives to deepen the connection that we hope to have with the other person, but also to learn who they are and how they evolved into being that person. And I think it would be great to use that same methodology in building these relationships, so that when you are implementing a new initiative or a new program, or you get federal funding, you already have that relationship. So story is really important. Other people's stories is really, and people love to talk about themselves. So that's an easy one.
Right, that people do love to talk about themselves, and that's very convenient when you're when you're meeting somebody. Let them talk about themselves. Make sure that when you answer, you give them something that you want them to hold on to. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Well, we're nearing the end of this amazing segment. Thank you
Wow,
for
that
joining.
was fast.
Before we go,
It goes quick.
it really does. We have to switch to an hour when we launch from the moon. That's what we're gonna do. Is there anything else that you would like to leave us with regarding stakeholder engagement, or implementation before we close out the show?
Yeah, well, I think the trick is to be like the three of you, and to know that making a connection and keeping it, and sticking with it, and being consistent, it is the key to any, and from dating to running a nonprofit. It's really, yeah, about that idea of just having a consistency, and being clear about who you are and what you want, and but at the same time being open to hear whatever anybody else has to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. We have another comment before we close out.
Okay.
Peter, we have one more comment. Alexander's been with us for the whole show. Thank you. So he said something really important. Yes. Everyone's favorite radio station. I have not heard that metaphorically in this comment, but what's in it for me? So we all know the WIFM
Mhm.
acronym. And yes, it's everybody's favorite radio station. And don't forget that when you're building partnerships. Thank you, Alexander.
Thank
We have
you.
enjoyed you. All right, Peter.
Yeah, this has been really helpful for me. Thank you so much for joining us today, Merle.
Thank you. It's lovely to be with you.
I think we've learned a lot. We've learned that we are in our business lives doing some things right, and how to think about it more systematically for our clients and other projects. So thank you so much for joining us today, Merle,
Thank
and
you.
have a great weekend, everybody.
Take care. Bye.